Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to this program. My name is Wilbert Mukori. Yesterday, myself and Benjamin, we discussed the issue of the land. Tonight, we'd like to follow up on it and specifically focus on the eviction of resettled blacks. A number of blacks have been resettled since the year 2000, some of them on farms that had been seized from the whites, and some of them have been resettled on farms that were allocated to the ruling elite, who went on to then subdivide them and sell them. And some of them have been resettled on land given to them by chiefs or Zanu PF officials. Now the regime is coming back and evicting them. Let's just listen to this video and then we'll discuss it.
Few councils observe that from now on, do so. Leasing and the selling of communal and agricultural land by local authorities. Agricultural land belongs to the president, not you. And your commitment shifts from party vision to government vision, fortunately.
Ndakapiwawo pokugara saka takangozoona mapurisa ototi huyai uku kutidana kwavakaita vana kunge vatiudza kuti imhosva vangotiti kanzuro iri kuda kupeka yozokupai pokugara kana ane awanikwa vari murodhi kana pachii tinozomuratidza pokugara saka takamhanyidzana kuenda kugomo tikanonyoresa mazita edu takadzokawo nhasi tikanzi koti nhasi tauya pakoti makuseni ndopatatozoudza kunzi muri vasungwa mune mhosva pamuri kugara rusiri pamutemo tanzi tofanira kubhadhara $100 fine. Tinofanira kunge tabva musi wa 10 May tofanira kunge tisisipo panzvimbo patiri kugara apa. Tikapawo chichemo chokuti hatina kokuenda vakati mune motoenda kunoona kanzuro kana velenzi. Tsamba dzekwashe dzanzi hadzidiwi nokuti she vatoriwo zvavakatoita zvisi pamutemo.
Tiri kubudisa mapepa amadzishoti she vanhu vaganipa kuti ndigare mambo ivo vari kutaura kuti mambo havasi bvudzi revhulilenzi.
Arwadziwa zvikuru nezvaitikawo patirani tisina kuti waritoka but arwadziwa zvikuru because chekutanga chinogara munzvimbo hakuna munhu anongobva kwaanobva samunhu yangoti takutogara panapa hazviitike kumarizevha unosvika utaura nemunhu hama yako yokupa pekugara woenda kwasabhuku obvuma kuti ndizvo washe tsamba yakwashe unenge una kuti ndizvo pauri kugara but manje suddenly vaungouya kungotiti mimi ifai pamakagara hapasi estate land.
Tashungurudzika nenhau yemastendi. Takapuwa mastendi nachief Gutu asi nhasi tanzi tibve pasina 7 days wanzi tinge tofanira titenge tabva saka isu takasiwa padzimba dzevabereki tiri kunzi tibve hatichazivi titodii ende vari kutudza kuti vanoda mari yakawandisa.
Hatina kwekuinda uyezve mari yacho iri kutotinetsa kuwana. Tanga tine chikumbiro chekuti dai kanzuro yagonawo kutinyorayo mazita tienda chiro pawaiting list tichibhadhara mari shoma shoma tiwanewo pekugara nekuti pekuinda hatina.
Mari dzemutero taibhadhara saka zvakutishamisa kuti saka mari iyi sabhuku waiendepi nemari yedu isitaiudzwa taingoya topiwa marisita asi ati vane mudhindo wekanzuro. Nhasi takumuka tichiudzwa kuti inzvimbo yekanzuro. Hurumende daiona zvekuita nesu yatiwanirawo kana kwokuti tsvetawo nekuti patatu vapatoreswa kutomira kutotanga nhasi.
Do so.
There we have it. I'd like to invite Benjamin again. Benjamin, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. To our viewers, thank you for joining us.
What's your comment on this one, Benjamin?
It's sad developments, really. I think it's you know, I'm not surprised coming from the ruling party, from the president himself, Emerson Mnangagwa. I think it's no surprise. This is how they operate. This is how they do business. This is how they treat, you know, the civilians. You know, he's the one that has been tasked to be a guide, a pillar, you know, a source of security to the people of Zimbabwe. But then now he's become a thorn in the flesh. And I just wanted to say, I did mention this yesterday, that there is nobody that can just up and just decide to say, I want to build my house here, or I want to stay here. Somebody would have granted the authority. And now it's coming to light, as you can see. These people, they were given some form of assurance that you can build here. And the worst part is, you know, some people, they are saying they've been staying there since their fathers, you know. I mean, surely it's very sad if somebody is going to do that and just, you know, give somebody a deadline to say such and such a day you need to go. That is the place that you've known all your life. If you were born, you know, probably born there, grew up there, having your kids there as well. It's very sad, very, very sad.
Well, I'd like to that's to for the benefit of the listeners, to differentiate between communal areas, as Mnangagwa mentioned it there, which in the colonial days was called tribal trust lands. And in the tribal trust lands, as I tried to explain yesterday, no one owns land. The land is held in trust by the tribe. And the tribe is, of course, nobody in particular, because the tribe itself can be told it can be moved, and everybody has got to move. So this was a way by the whites to make sure that the blacks do not own any land. And as long as you don't have title deeds to the piece of land, you cannot use it as collateral to borrow money, for instance, to build a decent house. Because even if you build a decent house, you cannot sell it, the house, with the piece of land as an going concern, because the land does not belong to you. But the other thing here that we are seeing here, and which is involving most of these people today, and I would like to focus us on, is these blacks who were resettled, some of them on farms that were seized by the whites, some of them on land that was seized by the regime and given to Zanu PF officials, who have later on made a fortune by subdividing that land and selling it to people like you and me. And then now the regime is turning around and saying, oh, no, that land is agricultural land. And when the individual was given that farm, he was given a letter to use it as agricultural land. They had no right to subdivide it and let people settle there. That is the argument that is being used here. But what I also like to pick on is what you referred to there, Benjamin. And I think that is really at the heart of this problem, the political angle to this. Zanu PF has never given any one of those people the title deeds to the land. So your ownership of the land has always been very tenuous. And in this particular case, you can tell that it is tenuous, because somebody who has lived on the same piece of land for the last 20 years, now all of a sudden the regime is saying, or you shouldn't have been living there. So all this time, why didn't you say so? The truth of the matter is, even during come up to elections, Zanu PF itself has been dishing out land to encourage people to vote for it. The minute the elections are over, suddenly you're told, no, you shouldn't have been given that land. And I strongly suspect that what we are seeing here, Benjamin, is Operation Mafutera Papi, Mark 2023, where Zanu PF is saying most of these resettled farmers, they did not vote for the regime. And now it's payback time. That, I think, is what is happening here.
Yes, I agree with you. It's got to be a political move, really, because first of all, you can also see the place, that was Gutu Magistrate's office. I think that also goes to show that it was targeted. So I honestly believe this is how, and I'm sure everybody knows by now, this is how Zanu PF operates. When it's time for elections, bring your names forward. We are dishing out parcels of land, and you are given these parcels of land without title deeds, mind you. It's just an agreement, just like you say, you are given pieces of paper with which tomorrow can be revoked or can easily be cancelled. This is why they do not want to give anybody title deeds, such that they keep the leverage on the people. This is what I think it is. And without knowing really what SADC's stance is on Zimbabwe's future regarding the past elections, it's still debatable to say whether they are going to intervene or not. I think Zanu is trying to hold their cards close to their chest and try and intimidate people. But this is how they've always done. So it comes as no surprise. But it's quite unfortunate that as Zimbabweans, we have not yet grasped what these guys stand for and what these guys are always doing, such that we change our approach towards their enticements and start to think for ourselves. I think this is now necessary for Zimbabweans to wake up to some of the things that are happening. We cannot just continue sitting idle and watch a few people, just push us aside as if bulldoze us aside as if we are of no value. I mean, for example, yesterday you were talking about Bona owning Bona Mugabe, the daughter of the late former president Robert Mugabe. She owns land that is the size of Lesotho, and this land, just like any other person, does not belong to her. Most probably, they're also leases, but why then do you target somebody that owns 1 or 2 hectares when somebody owns all that and nothing happens to them? It's quite puzzling, to say the least. For me, I think it is just unfair to treat other ordinary citizens different from the elite. It's not just only Bona. Most of the ministers, most of the Zanu PF members own more than 2 to 3 farms, of which they are running down. They're not even being productive. I think it's very, very unfair, and we need to start asking some of these questions.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think that this, again, the two issues can be really linked. These resettled blacks who are being moved. The immediate thing to be noticed there is that They were never given really any title deeds. The letters that they received from the various officials are not title deeds. And they can easily be revoked, and they've been revoked. And I agree with you that the issue of the title deeds, except for the ruling elite, like in this particular case, Bona, you may find with that the 12 farms that she owns, she has title deeds, and she is able to sell it legally to somebody else. But other people, you find they will have been given these letters from the Ministry of Agriculture saying you can go and farm on that farm. And it's a letter that can easily be revoked by the regime. And some of these settlers would have been settled by the Zanu PF government itself. And yet when the regime finds it doesn't like what they're doing, it's revoking those letters. That is the whole point. I think this is at the heart of one of the problems in Zimbabwe. You are not allowed to own anything. And land is probably the single most important asset for ordinary Zimbabweans, particularly those in the rural areas, but even those in the urban centers. Because if you've got ownership of land, you can build a decent homestead on it, and you can sell it as an asset. You can borrow money using it as collateral security. If you don't own the land, you cannot invest in anything with a long-term future. That is at the heart of our problem. And to have a nation, a whole nation, where millions of people are not allowed to own even half a square kilometer of land is an outrage. And I think this is at the heart of our problem. Why is it that people have failed to say, no, this is not right? The whites treated us in this way, made us third-class citizens. And yet 43 years after independence, the same thing is still happening. The regime has found ways of making sure that people like Bona can own and have title deeds to 12 farms the size of Lesotho. And yet, you and me are not allowed to own half a square kilometer of land. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Just because the regime wants to be able to harass you, move you and me as it so pleases. This is at the heart of our problem. And I think in this particular case, really, it boils down to people like you and me. Are we going to allow ourselves to be abused all our lives? The abuse extended to the next generation and the generation after that. There is nothing that stops you having the right to own land. The only land as a black person in Zimbabwe today you can own is in the urban centers. And this is why you find with some of the people in the diaspora, for instance, who are thinking that maybe after a while, I've got to think of going back to Zimbabwe. They are buying land in the urban areas and building a home. And this is some of them who are finding themselves in a situation where the regime is now turning around and saying, oh, that land shouldn't have been subdivided for people to build their homes because it's agricultural land. And as Mnangagwa is putting it so arrogantly, it belongs to the president. And then if you go to the rural areas, you are told You are not allowed to own land. So if you're going to build a decent home in the rural area on a piece of land that you don't own, you're crazy. Because if you should find you want to move, you cannot sell that house with a piece of land as a going concern, because you don't own the land. And so it is impossible to invest in the rural areas. Why? Why are we being denied even just a piece of land, half a square kilometer? I mean, this is what I can't really get my head around. Why are we accepting such an absurd situation?
It's a very good question, but one that is pretty difficult to grasp. Yes, but look at it this way. You know, whatever means that we try and speak up, be it, for example, you have grown up there, you have stayed there for 20 years, and your folk or your parents have been staying there for their lifetime, I suppose. And then down the line you are being told that you don't own the land. You have a right to even approach the courts. I mean, you have a genuine case to say, I've stayed here for all my life. My family has invested here. They've built their homestead and everything. But then we know the state of our courts. They are captured. They are one-sided. So that leaves you with one option, which means take to the streets, right? Or do it the illegal way. Try and push your agenda. And you know how it is with Zanu PF. They will push back with force, on ordinary citizens. These are the type of people that will open fire, will send, soldiers to these farmlands or these communal lands and harass people and destroy. And some will go on as to start looting their chickens and their goats there. So you try and weigh how easy or which is the better way, to try and go about it. You find that these people are kind of boxed in now. So really, this is how Zanu PF thrives. It loves to keep people in fear. Right now, they've intimidated. Yes, they've targeted a few communal lands, but everybody has heard the news. This is what is happening. Everybody is in fear. If you are to say we go back into election mode, I am sure Zanu PF will win in the communal lands extremely, because people are afraid. They're frightened of this regime. So it's I find it difficult to say, people are cornered. They cannot approach the courts. And I mean, any court, this is a basic human right, let's say, right? It is a basic human right to have shelter, to have peace of mind, to have ownership. I mean, Zanu PF did not go to war by itself. A lot of people sacrificed. Even if your folk did not go, your great grandfather did not go to war, they sacrificed. Somebody had to feed them. Somebody had to do the chimjiba and the, we all had a part to play. Unfortunately, not all could have carried guns. But then you cannot go now and hold other people hostage. Until when? I am sure at one point something is going to give. People are going to push back. And I think the day is coming, because I think this year is not easy, giving up your home that you have known, and you have invested a lot of money. A lot of Zimbabweans are not very wealthy. The the poverty that is in Zimbabwe is just saddening, right? And then you take away the last straw. That's very selfish. I believe it's very selfish. And yet, most of them, and I will still say again, most of these ruling elite who have 4 or 5 farms, maybe times 10 the size of the land that they're taking from these people combined, have run them down. They've sold the farm equipment. Nothing is growing there. It's abandoned. All they just wanted to do was take over a nice house, take over the cattle, and they've since slaughtered and sold everything and pocketed everything for themselves and abandoned them. But then here we are going to somebody's 1.5, hectares or whatever, just to try. I don't understand. Zimbabwe is so big. Why would you want to go after somebody's small little property? Surely. I just don't understand. It's sad. I think it's very sad, and it's very, very, it's shallow of them to do that. And I wonder who gave the president, the right to own land. I've never heard of it. He doesn't own land as well. He's just entrusted to look after it, probably. That's as far as it goes. Not to say that he owns land. He doesn't own anything.
Yeah, I think it is important here for the listeners to understand the politics behind it. They have stayed, some of them, for the last 20 years. And as long as they were voting for Zanu PF, they were allowed to stay. Last election, Zanu PF rigged those elections. SADC, AU, and even Zimbabwe's own Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission said those elections were rigged. So the regime would know which communities rejected it. And I believe some of these resettled farmers would have been identified as some of the communities that rejected the regime. And this is payback time. And they're being punished. That's why I say this is Operation Mavotera Papi, Mark 2023. I think people need to understand that there is politics involved here. These people have got to say, at the end of the day, I have the right to own land, and I've also got the right to a meaningful vote. Because that is at the heart of it. If you voted for Zanu PF, I can tell you now, these people would not be harassed. That's why for the last 20 years they've been allowed to stay. Some of them and we all know, that in the past you'll find come elections, Zanu PF will be saying it's allocating land for people to build their own homes. Come and register with the party and will be given the land. And that's how some of them got that land. And as long as they continued voting for Zanu PF, they were allowed to stay. The minute you realize that Zanu PF is not taking us anyway, you try to exercise your right to a meaningful vote. Operation Mavotera Papi kicks in. And there is nothing like post-elections for Zanu PF to punish those people whom it considers have gone astray. This is only Operation Mavotera Papi phase 1. Other people will be punished by the regime because it knows exactly how people voted. Part of the rigging is you know what the true feeling of the people is, and then you try to falsify the result to make sure that you win. But then you visit those people to teach them a lesson. And I think this is what we are witnessing now. There are a lot of people who are being punished because they voted incorrectly. And like I said, one of the reasons why Zanu PF did not give people in the rural areas title deeds is because they want to maintain control over them. And the reason why they did not give any title deeds to people who were resettled since the farm seizures of 2000 is because the regime also want to maintain control over those people. And this is what we are seeing now. These resettled farmers, some of them are being given, like you correctly said there, 24 hours, 3 months to move. What? They've stayed there for the last 20 years. You never moved them. Now all of a sudden you find out there's need for them to be moved. And it's so urgent that they are only being given a matter of a few weeks, a few months to move. They are being punished for having voted for the wrong party. Zanu PF is renowned. It's a party that rules by fear and violence. And keeping people on their toes is part and parcel of the way Zanu PF operates. And I think this is at the heart of the problem. And the people themselves need to understand that. And need to understand that their right to own land is a fundamental right. It's not a privilege. Their right to a meaningful vote is also a fundamental right. It's not a privilege. But until people get to their heads around that, Benjamin, in my view, we'll be going round and round in circles of these issues. I don't know whether you'd want to give your closing remarks before we finish.
Sure, yes. I agree with you. It's a fundamental right, but you know, for me and you that know how to exercise our rights actually, we would try and find a way around this whole dilemma. But you're looking at people that are in the communal lands that find it extremely difficult to even comprehend some of these basic human rights. It will be very difficult. And even if they were to approach the courts and to try and hire lawyers and everything, it's extremely difficult because their wallets or their pockets are not deep enough to try and pay their way through. As you can hear, they are now being charged. At some stances, they were saying they were told to pay, and they cannot pay. It's unfortunate. This is what this government has decided to do, upon its own people. To abuse your own fellow human, fellow countrymen, actually. So, for me, in closing, I would like to say, it's a very sad development, one that Zanu PF has always taken, but I think now it's also time. You are right there. It's also time to look for ways, to explore ways how best to stop the regime from treating other human beings like that, other countrymen like that. It's quite unfortunate. It's a very sad day, sad week actually, and sad developments.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. My closing remark will be for those people in the rural areas, claiming your right to own the half a kilometer square of land where your homestead stands right now is up to you. All you've got to do is make a conscientious decision that this piece of land belongs to me. And you start investing in it and stack your claim on it. by building a decent home, complete with clean running water, toilets, plant fruit trees, look after that land as if you already have the title deeds. And you should, from now on, demand that you should be given title deeds to that half a square kilometer of land. That is the only way you're going to assert your right. Nobody's going to fight it for you. And as for those who were resettled and now are being evicted, it is another matter. You were resettled and you were never given any title deeds. And now that you've been evicted, I think it's a tough fight. But those who are resettled and are still haven't been evicted, my advice to you would be you should, from now on, demand that you are given title deeds. You cannot be used as a football by the politicians who, if you do not vote for them, all of a sudden you find that that letter of offer that you were given is withdrawn. That is just simply being abused by other people. And so your fight is to fight to make sure that you get the title deeds. And as long as you don't have them, you know that you're vulnerable to the political machinations of tyrannical regimes like Zanu PF. This is a fight with fighting. And it's up to you to fight for your right to own land and to have the security to invest on that land. And when you have got title deeds, you can go to the bank and borrow and use the land as collateral and develop it, knowing fully well that all the developments you put on it will increase the value of that property. It's an investment for you, even if you should want to sell it and move somewhere else. But also it is an investment that you can leave in your will to your children or your grandchildren. This is where you start accumulating wealth. The main problem we have in Africa right now in countries like Zimbabwe is because our grandfathers were never allowed to own anything. They left nothing for future generations. This has got to end. And the fight has got to be made by ordinary people like you and me. It's not a question of you must take them to court. It's a question of you must make a stand. And that is what we have led in Zimbabwe. People making a stand and saying, no, this is not right. And those who have been evicted, people like you and me who are observers, condemning what the regime is doing. It is our duty to support those people who are being abused right now. Because it could have been you or me. And we would have welcomed even somebody speaking up and saying, no, this is not right. Commenting that this is not right. But the deafening silence out there is worrying. I think this is one of the weaknesses of our society. As long as it's not happening to me, I should stay out. Tragic. Thank you very much again, Benjamin, and thank you very much, listeners, for joining us tonight. And good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you, and good night to our viewers.